Good afternoon for Tokyo. Good morning from the Paris and Rome. Here, actually, in the Europe, it is 8 a.m. It is 4 p.m. in Tokyo, I believe. We would like to start today's Rieti BBL Brown Bag Lunch Seminar. My name is Aki Tamura, Senior Advisor at Rieti and the Director General of Gestro Paris. I'm going to serve as a moderator and the commentator for this seminar. Today, we are truly honored to welcome Dr. Lorenzo Castellani. He's a good friend of mine. He is a tenure-track researcher assistant professor, Luis Guido, Cali University. Luis University is actually the highest ranked Italian university for social science at international level. Lorenzo used to serve as a visiting professor at the Sciences Po Paris, King's College London, and Open University London. He is one of the most prominent Italian political scientists. He is frequently interviewed by various newspapers and other media. On Italian politics, he is frequently quoted not just in Italian media, but also practically everywhere, such as French, the Le Monde, Le Figaro, and the British Economist and American, the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, something like that. And he has been quoted a couple of times by a Japanese newspaper even. He is not only the prominent the academia, but also he is well connected to the high-ranking layer of Italian government. When I visited Rome in April last year, he helped me to connect me to the several high-ranking officials of the government of Italy, which helped my stay in Rome quite productive. Lorenzo will deliver a lecture today titled Italy in Turbulent Times, Connecting Atlantic, Mediterranean, and Europe, Politics, Economy, and Foreign Policy. After his presentation, I will provide a short, quick question, and then the floor should be open to the audience for the posing the question until the 5 p.m. Before giving the floor to Lorenzo, I just would like to re-emphasize the relevance and the importance of his lecture today. As all of you know, the Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni recently visited Tokyo to have the bilateral summit with our Prime Minister Takaichi. Nowadays, we are frequently talking about the necessity of having a stronger alliance amongst the middle power. Whenever we talk about middle power, of course, obviously for us, one of the typical counterparts is Europe. But Europe is quite difficult to understand from Tokyo, even though we always share they say that we share the value, we share the common kind of worldview. We need to work together on the economy, the defense, or anything. Nevertheless, our understanding level of Europe is quite limited, unfortunately. For instance, the Europe has been, of course, driven with the Brussels, the European Commission at the center. Nevertheless, the European Union is, of course, obviously the combination of not only European Commission but also the 27 member states, and the dynamics amongst them is quite complex. And traditionally, European community has been driven by two major powers, which are the Germany and France. But nowadays, it's quite interesting phenomena that Italy is moving at the center of gravity of this European politics, primarily thanks to the political leadership of Giorgia Meloni. And one of her important characteristics is to maintain the relationship with as major political players, including the American counterparts, the Mr. Donald Trump. Therefore, we have to learn more about the dynamics of the Italian politics and how come she is maintaining a quite stabilized administration within the Italian politics, which has been quite famous for how should I say, not necessarily the stabilized for the number of years. I wanted to just reemphasize the relevance and importance of his lecture today. Then I would like to give a floor to Lorenzo. Lorenzo, you have a floor. You have 40 minutes for the seminar. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Tamura. It's a great pleasure for me to be hosted by Rieti, and it's an honor to discuss with the Japanese community about Italy in this very important and relevant moment for our country. I please suggest to share my slides, if possible, to the organization, because I can't see them. Okay, thank you very much. So the title I chose is Italy in Turbulent Times, Connecting Atlantic, Mediterranean, and Europe. I'm briefly explaining why. Atlantic, because Italy is traditionally a strong ally of the United States, and the reform of international order today makes the Atlantic particularly relevant. Mediterranean, because obviously Italy is a Mediterranean country, is from a geographical point of view, a platform in the Mediterranean. So this places the country at the center of this very relevant sea, particularly from an economic and geopolitical standpoint. And of course, Europe, there is an economic and political arrangement that is particularly relevant when we look at international economy and international politics. Next. So what we are going to see is the strategic position of Italy. Italy strategically tries to act as a bridge between the Atlantic, the Mediterranean, and Europe. We will see the global role of Italy, so the evolution of Italian politics in the last year in the global context, both at political level and economical level. So we will see at the intersection between foreign policy, European policy, trade, and domestic stability. That is something that Italy is reacquiring under the leadership of Giorgia Meloni. And so we will see, in particular, we will focus on the last 4 or 5 years to assess this change. Next slide. So which is, first of all, some elements on Meloni's government. So which is the environment, the political landscape in which Giorgia Meloni rose. First of all, from many years, let's say from 2013 elections, there was a very strong demand in the Italian public opinion of leadership, new leadership in particular, and as well as strong political polarization between the left-leaning coalition and the right-wing coalition. And Giorgia Meloni emerged as the leader of the right-wing coalition, and her main strengths were, in 2022, when she won the election, unity, consistency, and credibility. This made possible for her and her party, Fratelli d'Italia, to capture 26% of the support, plus 2 other parties that joined the center-right coalition, Forza Italia and Lega, gaining 44% of the total vote. This made possible for the electoral law mechanism in Italy to get an absolute majority in parliament, both in the chamber and as well in the Senate. Moreover, in 2024, for the European election, there was a consolidation of the consensus for Giorgia Meloni. Fratelli d'Italia grew to nearly 29%, getting the better results for a right-wing party in the Italian history. And as well, the coalition proved to be resilient. The sum of the 3 parties in the EU election was around 48%. So a very strong result that consolidated Meloni's government and Meloni's leadership. Next. So first of all, let's assess the transition, because this is particularly relevant to understand Giorgia Meloni. Giorgia Meloni was usually in the past depicted as a far-right leader, as a bearer of discontinuity, as a potential threat as well for the European Union and the European stability. But in reality, she proved to be, and she bear more stability than disorder. First of all, because she chose policy continuity with the previous government, the government that Italy had in 2021, 2022, that was led by a very important banker and international technocrat, Mario Draghi. It was a coalition government, a national coalition government that decided basically to make some very important choices. First of all, the adherence to the next generation EU programs in order to recover the economy after the pandemic, and above all, in the international environment, the support to the military effort of Ukraine against the Russian aggression. These two elements were maintained by Giorgia Meloni in order to build up her credibility as international leader and acting in continuity with the very well-respected figure of Mario Draghi. Which were the key constraints that she faced when she arrived in the Prime Minister office? Well, first of all, the fiscal discipline. In the European Union, there are shared rules to impose to any member state a form of fiscal discipline. In the past, Italy had some problems to respect these rules, but Meloni decided, also with the other leader of the coalitions, to avoid any standoff on political economy with the European Commission and to work with the Commission respecting the financial rules at European level. And as said, she continued to develop, to implement the Next Generation EU program, a program that financed Italy with more than 200 billion euro in subsidies and loans. And this was very important for the Italian budget and as well for developmental policies. Market impact, what Meloni recognized was as well, despite she was depicted as said as a Eurosceptical or nationalist leader, or populist, sometimes by international media, she decided to adhere to this fiscal rule in order to secure a positive credit rating updates, reducing the pressure and the cost of the Italian debt. As you know, Italian public debt is very high, is the highest in the European Union, the widest one, so it's very costly for the country to face a scenario in which there's a strong pressure on state bonds. So the adherence to these rules shared at the European level and to maintain a budget balance, this was a will, of course, by Meloni, allowed Italy to have a better position in financial terms and as well to improve the rating. And this was a careful choice that was strategically good for Meloni and as well for the reputation of the country. Next slide. We have to as well consider the geopolitical context in which the Meloni's government is acting and was acting in 2022. First of all, the major element of disruption, the Russia-Ukraine war, this made a fundamental shift in EU energy security and as well in defense priorities. So Italy embraced a very strong diversification of energy suppliers, particularly from Northern Africa. And this choice was supported by the EU Commission. And as well, it started a rearmament policy in order to foster the defense expenditure. The energy crisis was particularly relevant for Italy because there was a skyrocketing of energy prices, and Italy is a manufacturer economy, as we would see, a transformational economy. So it's very important to have a sustainable price of energy. But the diversification was played skillfully, particularly by Eni, the state-owned company in the oil sector that activated new policies in terms of supply chain, particularly in Northern Africa, as said. Then there was the implementation of the EU Recovery Fund. We called it PNRR, that provided this 200 billion euro for post-pandemic recovery. These kind of policies were focused mostly on infrastructure, on digital transition, on environmental transition, and so they ameliorate basically the Italian infrastructures and Italian competitiveness during this year, creating as well a strong rebound of the economy after the depression of the pandemic. Political stability was important because Italy was coming from many, many years, since 2008, basically, of political instability. So there was nearly every year a new government, a different government with changing alliances in the parliament. But Meloni obtained in the polls in 2022 a clear victory. And for the fact that she proved to be a skillful leader, she maintained this role in government. And today she's leading the third longest serving government in Italian history. Very important role was played by 2024 European elections, where Meloni's government consensus strengthening, and this gave stability to the government and as well was propelling Italy's European role. Of course, Meloni can exploit as well the rise of other national populist politicians. First of all, the comeback of Donald Trump in the White House, but at the same time, the disruption of the political domestic environment, particularly in France and Germany. So the perception from 2024 was that Italy was gaining stability at domestic level and more predictability, while the other main European parties were facing a moment of destabilization. So this enhanced the role of Meloni and the role of Italy. So very important was also after the election of 2024, the pivoting towards right of the second commission led by Ursula von der Leyen, that is focusing more on immigration and security and defense rather than on a Green Deal or social policy as in the first commission led by Ursula von der Leyen. Next slide. So let's start from the economy and then let's move to the other policies. From a macroeconomic standpoint, the growth of Italy remained quite slow, 0.7, 0.6%, but there was a deficit reduction. The fiscal deficit fell from more than 8% in 2022 to 3% in 2025. The Meloni's government decided to maintain, as I said, that balance in the budget to reduce subsidies and tax credit policy that characterize the national policy of 2020, 2021, 2022. And she gained, from this perspective, a balance in terms of budget and respecting the fiscal rules of the EU. This gave to Italy the credit confidence. So credit worthiness was upgraded by Fitch and other rating agencies, reducing the cost of the Italian debt. Meanwhile, there was a rebound, let's say, of the economy, particularly in terms of employment. So today, unemployment reached record lows. It's something less than 6% today. That is the lowest since many, many years point of the Italian labor market. Next. So there was as well, in terms of trade, a trade balance reversal. There was an energy-driven deficit for, as said, the energy skyrocketing prices after the 2022. And today we are seeing a record surplus for the Italian trade balance. there was a dramatic turnaround. We moved from 34 billion euro deficit to a strong surplus today. In 2023, surplus that was achieved after the end of the energy crisis, so in the first year of Meloni's government. The performance was good in 2024 and as well in 2025. There was today a trade balance, a positive trade balance for Italy, around 40 billion euro. There was a strong resilience that was shown by exports in particular. So Italy rise as the fourth largest exporter in the world, with nearly 700 billion of exportation. That showed us the trend that after the debt crisis that we faced in 2011, 2012, 2013, three very hard years, there was a rebound of the Italian manufacturers and exporters that are performing very well, particularly in some niches of the market. Most of these enterprises are small, medium enterprises, and they are exporting mostly in the European Union and in the United States. Next, please. So we chart, let's say, the resilience that is shown. And the key sectors. The key sectors are machinery, pharmaceuticals, luxury goods, and high-end agriculture. Italian economy is still dominated by the small medium enterprises model. So the small medium enterprises, now internationalized, remain the backbone of Italian competitiveness. Most of them located in the center and in particular in the northern area of the country. Exports outside the EU exceeded 300 billion euro. So the exportation remained the main driver of the Italian trade policy. Next. So which is the role, okay, considering all these elements of Meloni's role in the European architecture, both politically and economically? Well, the strategic fulcrum, according to the strategy outlined by Meloni, is to place Italy as a Mediterranean gateway. And as a consequence, being a Mediterranean gateway led us to be a geopolitical bridge. This is the ambition to Africa and Middle East, and as well a country indispensable to EU stability, basically offering a stabilization of the Mediterranean front, particularly the northern front. Okay, so the idea was that Italy remained the main country in the northern area of the Mediterranean and a stable country capable to provide help to Africa and Northern Africa and Central Africa through programs of development, but at the same time connecting the Mediterranean with basically Germany and Northern Europe on one side, but potentially as well from east to west, following from the Balkans, let's say, towards the Atlantic. This is possible, for example, through the different possible routes in the Mediterranean. Okay, so from the Red Sea, or very recently in the development of the new corridor of IMEC, so connecting the India and the Indo-Pacific with Europe. So what we used to say is that there are, Italy can connect three seas, the Mediterranean, the Indo-Pacific, and as well the Northern Sea in the Northern Europe through a very complex logistic routes and organization. Italy now is borrowing in terms of budgets at a lower rates compared, for example, to France, something that was inconceivable up until 10 years ago. Okay, and fiscal credibility is restored. Meloni is taking an advantage in terms of stabilizing the government, as said, because, of course, she can plan more carefully the policy and, in particular, the economic and strategic policy. And there's as well in Europe a shifting balance that I explained at the very beginning of the lecture. So France weakened Macron's today is more politically isolated, both at internal level and an external level. But as well, Germany is facing a very deep and strong recession, particularly at the industrial level. And as well, Germany had problems of stability and resilience of the coalitions. So Italy feels the leadership vacuum. So there's a merit of Meloni, but as well, there are also the problems of the other in this landscape. Next. So which are, the strategic leverage that Meloni can use to increase the influence of Italy in the world and at European level? First of all, she posed herself as an indispensable mediator, so as a bridge between Washington and Brussels. What we know is that since Donald Trump came back to the White House, the relationship between the United States and Brussels became much more complicated for tariffs, for rearmament demands. So what Meloni is trying to do is to perform a role of bridge between Washington and Brussels, basically siding with the other European nations against, let's say, the most advanced remarks by Donald Trump, but at the same time avoiding to contrast openly the United States. She was capable as well to build up in this process a very strong alignment in most of the case with Ursula von der Leyen. So Brussels grants indulgence to Italy's policy autonomy, and this is a rare condition for a EU member. Probably won't last forever, but today, Italy is more influential on Brussels than Brussels influential on Italy, and this is something new for the Italian political landscape, because the discussion of the last 20 years was in the Italian domestic policy, looking at Brussels, was on the external ties imposed by Brussels. Today, in the fields as foreign policy or trade policy or Green Deal reformation or immigration, Italy is influencing basically Brussels more than in the past. And the other important element is that Italy is presented as a stable government in a fractured EU. So as said, Italy is growing in its importance and its relevance, not only for the capacity of Giorgia Meloni, but for the fact that the other European countries are facing political turmoils in their electoral geography, and this made more difficult for them, let's say, to play a role of leadership. This is very evident, for example, and was very evident in the last week when Giorgia Meloni met with the Chancellor Merz, the German Chancellor, because for the first time there was the sensation that Germany was dealing with Italy, let's say, in a very concrete and serious way, and not considering Italy a problem, but considering the Italian-German relationship as an opportunity. So this is showing us the change in the political environment. So Italy is emerging as a sort of third pillar, of course, not at the same level of France and Germany for obvious reasons. Germany remains a wider economy, a stronger economy. France is a nuclear power, so Italy is not a nuclear power, not at the same level in economic terms of Germany, but it is a reliable partner and a stable country today that can play a decisive role in trade, defense, and industrial policy. Okay, so in dealing, let's say, in this sector, Meloni is playing, let's say, a wider role, a more influential role compared to the past. Next, please. Another very important policy, both at external level and internal level in Meloni's strategy, is migration, okay, and foreign policy. First of all, there was these years foreign policy reorientation for Meloni. Okay, Meloni was presented, let's say, as a nationalist. In Europe, we use this term sovereigntism to point out the desire to, let's say, to point out the desire to make prevalent the national interest on the European one. And indeed, she shifted from this nationalism to a form of transatlantic pragmatism. That means to consolidate bonds within the EU, and particularly, let's say, pivoting the EU conservative closer to the European majority, more influential on von der Leyen's Commission. But at the same time, the idea was not only looking at Europe or the United States, that are, of course, two very important poles for Italian foreign policy, but to create a third pole. After many years of indecisiveness and, let's say, very timid policy, that is looking at Africa as the third pole. And what the Meloni's government did was to draft this plan that was called Piano Mattei plan, where the government invested around 7 billion euro to help the growth and the infrastructural development of Northern Africa and Central Africa countries, to have in exchange energy supply and a tightening of illegal immigration. This is the deal that Meloni drafted with African leaders. So in this context, Italy is moving around three poles in his foreign policy. The other idea that passed at European level is the migration externalization model. So with the new agreement with Albania to host migrants, to host the process of asylum seekers, she modeled it on the Australia offshore detention system. And this was the first EU experiment that was supported by all the other European countries. This is signaling the shift at European level of the attitude towards migration. Okay, so up until a few years ago, migration was considered a national problem. Italy faced a very harsh migration crisis between 2013 and 2017. Today, migration is recognized as a European problem, looking for European strategy. And on this policy, the ideas of Meloni became more and more influential and followed by the other governments. But at the same time, and I think this is interesting in comparing Italy and Japan, Italy has a very aged population. Okay, so there's a demographic problem that is very strong, and particularly for workers and workers of the future, there's a problem to recruit Italians because the demography is extremely low and the birth rates are very low. So what Meloni did was, on one side, contrasting illegal migration, but on the other side, creating a legal channel for migrants, not only from Africa, but also from other areas, in order to have a legal migration. 500,000 people in 3 years that could be involved in the northern industries or in the southern agriculture, but I would say tourism as well. So combining the contrast of illegal migration with the growth of the legal one in order to avoid the shortages of the labor market. There was a 60% reduction in legal arrivals in 2023 and 2024, so a remarkable result for the government. And Italy is continuing to working at EU level to reform the regulation on migration, making externalization more suitable. What is likely is that during this year, there will be an agreement on this, and so a shift of an official shift of the European policy on migration, adopting the Italian framework. Next. The other very important policy, of course, in the world of today is defense, and particularly the role of Italy within NATO. There was a NATO pressure escalation, so Trump administration demands 5% of the GDP spent on defense by 2030. The NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte calls for 3.5% by 2035. That's an ongoing negotiation. Italy spent 1.6% of the GDP in 2024. We are approaching the 2% in 2025. Potentially, I think there could be an expansion of defense expenditure up until 2.5% of the GDP without an involvement, let's say, of the European bonds or the European guarantees. But over this threshold, I think would be very difficult to reach a higher level of expenditure. 5% is unrealistic, as I'm going to explain in a while. So Italy is approaching the 2%. So feeling, the promise that Meloni made in 2024 to Donald Trump. But now let's see what will happen in eventual further increasing of the defense expenditure. It is quite difficult. First of all, because Italy's fiscal space is limited for the high public debt. Then we have these European funds, the Next Generation EU funds that are expiring in 2026. So the government, Meloni's government, can't use other funds, let's say, to develop defense policy. Welfare and pensions are consuming the 60% of the budget. So an aged population in a demographic crisis with a very high public debt made difficult, let's say, to reach the threshold of 5% or 3.5% without European funds or European tools. Next slide. I think there's another one before. Yes, this is creating, the need to expand defense program is creating a strategic dilemma. Okay, first of all, because rising defense expenditure face a public opinion obstacle. Only 70% of Italians are supporting defense spending increase. In Italy, there's a strong pacifist tradition. The left-wing opposition is against NATO expansion and defense expenditure increase. The same is for one ally of Meloni, that is the Lega, led by Matteo Salvini, one of the strongest figures in the right-wing coalition. So Meloni has a problem here because cannot pursue austerity in economic terms, related in particular to welfare, while dramatically rising military budgets. Okay, so we have a strategic dilemma ahead. So Italy must choose between honoring the NATO commitments that could require every year more than 40 billion annually increase by 2030, maintaining fiscal discipline under EU rules, or as well, if not, let's say, not fulfilling this promise, risking a transatlantic credibility. So this is a trilemma with no easy solution in current geopolitical environment. This is why Meloni seems to be very pro-European in terms of defense. She is always stressing the need to new tools, new funds for facing the challenge of the defense expenditure and the defense autonomy of Italy and Europe. Next slide, please. The other point connected to this is the relationship with the United States. We used to say that Giorgia Meloni has a very good relationship with Donald Trump. This is true. Meloni is considered not only an institutional ally, not only a traditional ally, but as well a political ally by Trump. There's a strong relationship with the White House on foreign policy. Italy remains one of the closest Trump's European ally. You can see these particularly in the posture toward Ukraine or toward China. But this was due to the leverage that the United States have on Italian politics. First of all, Italy had and is hosting many military bases of the United States, and the United States military umbrella is protecting Italy. The other leverage is that the exports in the United States is very strong for the European for the Italian economy. The trade volume reached the 70 billion euro in 2025, despite tariffs. There's a trade surplus. Italy has a surplus of over 40 billion euro towards the United States. Is the second largest global destination after Germany, and is a very important market, particularly for machinery and pharmaceutical. So the military umbrella plus the importance of exportation make the relationship between Italy and the US very important, and the White House has many leverages, let's say, to convince, Meloni to follow the foreign policy decided by the White House. Of course, Meloni is trying to do it in a clever way, so maintaining a balance in the relationship with the European Union and the member states and the White House. But I can give you later on, if you want, some examples of how Meloni is complying with Trump and is helping Trump at European and at global level. Next slide, please. Okay, so this relationship between Italy and the United States is connected as well to the challenges that are posed by the Trump second mandate. First of all, the tariff traps. Potential cost for Italy of the US tariffs is around 10 billion. It depends from the scenario, and it depends if the tariffs will remain stable or not. Meloni's response was a diplomatic visit in April 2025, at the end of April 2025, advocated for exemptions for some Italian products while maintaining European unity in responding to the tariffs. But Meloni is positioning against the strong protectionist retaliation of the EU against the United States. So from this perspective, you can see that Meloni is playing as a political ally of Trump, contrasting, for example, the idea of France and other European partners to give a strong retaliation against American tariffs, or as in the recent case of Greenland, against aggressive Greenland policy. Meloni always trying to cool off the European response against Trump. The other element is that despite the threats and despite the tariffs, the Italian export to the United States grew by 20% in early 2025. And as well, in the last decade, the investment that Italian industries are making in the United States are rising in a considerable way. So the relationship between the two countries remains very strong. The bond is very relevant, and Meloni is acting as a realist leader. So considering that the United States, okay, now the relationship is more difficult for Trump, but they remain the main partner at political, military, and economic level. She successfully, in December 2025, negotiated with Trump on the pasta tariffs. You know that pasta is a great symbol, not only a great production for Italy, and Trump at the moment decided to impose a very heavy tariffs on pasta, but the government was capable to reduce these tariffs to a lower level and to have some exemptions on some products. So this was considered a success for Meloni, particularly in terms of communication and in terms of, let's say, political stance in the relationship with Trump. Next slide. The other point that is connecting Italy with the US is the relationship with China. We faced a strategic recalibration with China. So first of all, Italy in 2019 decided to accept a memorandum for joining the Belt and Road Initiative, but Meloni's government chose not to renew this memorandum in 2023, aligning with Western preferences and with Washington preferences in particular. This was replaced by a new framework with a 3-year pragmatic action plan on trade and non-strategic infrastructure. This is a very important point. Italy has a good relationship with China. The commercial relationship is strong, both in buying raw materials from China and as well, let's say, for the access of the Italian products to the Chinese market. But what is excluded now in this relationship is everything that is considered strategic. So everything that is attached to technology or to important infrastructures, as for example, the ports, the harbors, or the technological startups or the defense sector. So China remains Italy's second largest non-EU trading partner. So the relationship is not wasted, but is recalibrated. And there is as well an industrial tension, particularly on electric vehicles. So the idea of Italy sided with this idea to increase tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles and eventually to attract Chinese factory investments in Italy, but avoiding, let's say, the competition on electric vehicles made by China that can be destructive of the European, particularly car-making producers. So from this perspective, Italy is fully aligned with the ideas of von der Leyen Commission on China, and that's a recalibration. It seemed in the past that Italy could be the best ally of China, one of the best ally of China in Europe in 2019 or in 2020, but now things has changed. So there has been a recalibration in the last years, and this was made by Meloni's approach, and also dealing and cooperating with the White House. Next slide. And then finally, Japan. So this new renewed relationship with Japan, a strategic partnership that started to be upgraded in the last 2 years, with an action plan adopted on defense, economy, and technology, with the idea of technology resilience, so with a joint focus on semiconductor supply chain security and on research and development. And as well, perhaps the most important program in the defense sector is the building up of the 6th generation jet under this project with the United Kingdom and Japan that is called GCAP program, to develop this new airplane for military application. And the recent developments are the partnership on raw materials, space, and technology that had been discussed in the previous weeks by the Prime Minister of Japan and Giorgia Meloni. So what we are seeing is that is an effort by Italy to be present as well in the Indo-Pacific. Through IMEC, through military missions, Italy participated in the last 2 years to missions in the Indo-Pacific, and as well renewing a partnership with Japan and South Korea. All of this is made from a strategic point of view, to have a stronger resilience in terms of supply chain and in the strategy of containment, let's say, of Chinese influence, exploiting as much the opportunity offered by this partnership. Next slide. Okay, so finally, last slide, we are running perfectly on time. Which are the future outlook and challenges? What is very important to assess is that if Meloni will remain in government in the next years, how the MATEI plan, the plan for energy and trade partnership across Africa, will develop, and if there will be a further investment in terms of resources. Structural hurdles, so how low productivity and demographic decline will remain long-term constraints for Italy, will remain a liability, and how the government will handle these problems. The geopolitical bridge, Italy aims to mediate, as I said, between US protectionism and EU regulatory ambition. Meloni's government assumed this realist approach in international relationship and pursuing national interests in the Mediterranean Sea. What has to be assessed in the future is how this ambition to act as a geopolitical bridge will work, and eventually how it will develop. And this will depend not only, of course, from Italy, but from all the other geopolitical actors. And finally, strategic resilience. So a diversifying trade towards the Indo-Pacific and the Middle East remain essential. Very important for Italy to open up new routes to make the supply chain more resilient, and as well to increase, the possible trading partnership and military partnership with a country as Japan. So I stop here. Thank you very much. And now I'm glad to answer to your questions.